these kinds of things. Listen to voice and rationality. I chimed in. Haven't you people ever heard of closing the goddamn door? No, it's much better to fix these kinds of things with a sense of, well, in fact, well, I'll look at it this way. I mean, technically, our marriage is saved. Well, this calls for a toast, so pour the champagne. All right, sorry. That's my shit. I fucking love Panic at the Disco, bruh. All right. Hey guys, my name is Zay. Welcome to my channel. I make videos about mindfulness, spirituality, and my personal experiences. Today's conversation is going to get a little bit political slash philosophical. I have a lot that I want to talk about, and as you can see, I have a glass of wine with me, so I recommend you do the same thing. Grab your wine, grab your rolling tray, your bong, whatever you need to get comfortable, because this is going to be a pretty long talk, okay? So today I just want to discuss communication and human interaction, okay? There's a certain type of psychological communication issue running rampant throughout society, especially today's society, inhibiting one's ability to think objectively, to conduct critical analysis. People are not listening to understand, and people are not responding appropriately. So basically, people are not communicating with a sense of poise and rationality, right? People's emotions, trauma, attachment to subjective thinking warrant a type of inability to communicate effectively. All right, so let me just say this. I despise the polarizing language that is used in American society. I hate it. Left versus right, liberal versus conservative, red versus blue. I absolutely hate it. And here's why. It restricts people to the confines of fixed ideologies within prisms of black and white, or again, blue and red, within certain groups. So not only is this harmful because values and opinions fluctuate as more knowledge and wisdom or experience is acquired, but people can hold similar values of that of a particular group without actually identifying with that group. So when someone has an opinion or a stance on something, and the person in opposition to them just assumes that they're a liberal or a conservative, it's like, is that all you're able to come up with? Like, is your thinking that polarized to the point where you can't see past the prisms of red and blue and political affiliations? Like, do you really assign narratives to people's entire lives based off of their political affiliation, even if they were to claim a certain group? It's giving small-mindedness, okay? And in evaluating and analyzing these interactions where confusion is created and heightened around, like, a person's opinions versus their identity versus, the groups that they identify with, my mind always goes back to middle school, where I first learned about the concept of logic, especially as it pertains to mathematical questions. So we learned about if-then statements. And a lot of times in communication or human interaction in today's society, people are using false if-then statements to make assumptions about people's entire lives. And it's absolutely sickening. It's disappointing because I've thought that I would like to think that as a collective, we've evolved past that, but clearly not. So even though we're grown, I'm going to go ahead and take it back. I'm going to take it back to middle school so I can basically explain all of this and break it down for you, okay? You have two statements, statement A and statement B. So in a true if-then statement, statement A is true, and because of that, statement B is always true. For example, if you were born in America, then you are American. I mean, unless you renounce your citizenship. But generally, that is a true statement. Statement A is true. So if you were born in America, then you are an American. Statement B is always true, right? That's a true if-then statement, okay? In a false if-then statement, statement A might be true, but just because statement A is true doesn't necessarily mean statement B is true, okay? So it's like saying if you're an American citizen, then you must have been born in America. that's a false statement, because immigrants born in other countries can obtain American citizenship, and they are considered Americans, but that doesn't mean that they were born in America. So all I did was flip those two statements to create a false or a true if-then statement. However, it's not always that simple, okay? People be really running with some wild shit with their falsified if-then statements. So usually falsified if-then statements are rooted in making assumptions and jumping to conclusions. I'm going to give a very detailed example of this because I just had an interaction personally like this. And I really need to just break this down so that we can understand the mental gymnastics taking place here. So even though, I'm just going to open this up by saying, even though I'm a black woman who dates and has only dated black people, right? I support interracial marriage. Those are two things that can exist at the same time. I'm a black woman who dates black people, but at the same time, I support interracial marriage. I believe that, you know, regardless of your skin color or your ethnicity or whatever, you should be able to date whoever you want without criticism. Yeah, without criticism, shame, or, you know, legality issues. Like, there should be no reason why Loving versus Virginia is on the table, especially in 2022. Like, not only are we so mixed up that you really can't tell the difference anymore between people's heritages, but it's 2022. Like, we've been past that for some years now. Like, come on, bro. So, from there, I would say I don't think that we should ban interracial marriage. And in this interaction in particular, some, like, emotionally charged, extremist, pro-black person responds to me and says, oh, so you support interracial marriage, so that must mean that you like race play. That must mean that you are a coon, a bedwench. Excuse me? Please tell me how we got there. Because there are a lot of assumptions within that statement alone, within that response alone. Like, let's start there. First of all, the observer is taking my statement, I don't think states should ban interracial marriage, to assume that, one, I'm personally open to dating outside of my race. I am. But you don't know that. You made an assumption that I'm open to dating outside of my race. Two, that I prefer to date outside of my race, which is not true. And three, the people I date outside of my race are white. Now, even if statements A and B were true, how do you know that I prefer white people? Right here is where I've made a very general statement, and usually the observer makes it very specific assumptions about me based off of a general statement, leaving absolutely no room for how I came into my perspective or what experiences or narratives have shaped my viewpoint. All right, so now let's look at the second part of this false if-then statement. So based on three assumptions that they've made, one, that I prefer to date that I'm open to dating outside my race. Two, that I prefer to date outside my race. And three, that I prefer to date white people. They then go on to draw a very ridiculous conclusion. You must be a coon / bedwench who's into race play. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is an assumption, conclusion / insult / assumption sandwich. Okay, because there's a lot going on in there that just isn't true, and it's kind of chaotic. We're reaching really hard and really far. One, the observer assumed that I'm into kinks, and more specifically assumed that I'm into race play. Like, why would your mind go to that? Why would that be your response to, I don't think we should ban interracial marriage? Oh, so you're into race play? What is that? Like, what the fuck? And then, two, the observer slapped me with a derogatory slur. Like, why do I have to be a coon or a bedwench or whatever just because I made a general statement about something that doesn't even necessarily have anything to do with me? Because I don't necessarily plan on marrying someone outside my race, right? I mean, fate does what it does. I'm not opposed to it, but it's not something I'm planning for. So this doesn't necessarily affect me, and I'm not currently dating interracially. So this doesn't even necessarily affect me. I just have a general opinion about it, and I'm sharing it, and you use my very general opinion to make an assumption on my entire life, like very personal parts of my life at that. So that's a mental illness. I have no other words for it, because I'm seeing people piling layers and layers and layers of judgment and assumptions and conclusions and all of this crap on top of like very general opinions, very general statements. And that is like not effective when it comes to communication or understanding. Like, what are you doing? Now that I'm thinking about it, this is actually really so perplexing, because I've never dated a white person in my entire life. I don't even think I've ever kissed, actually no, I kissed a white person before. I've kissed a couple of white people, but I've never dated a white person before. So this is just very perplexing. I just think that's funny. Like, to just assume, it's not even funny. It's sad, but it's like very ironic. Like, how you just gonna assume something very personal about somebody just because they made a very general statement? So that's like the first way that I'm noticing that human interaction in today's society is very fucked up. This irrational logic presents itself in countless interactions, whether they be in person or online. I usually see this kind of thing online, where strangers are making if-then statements about people they don't even know. Like, you don't even know me. So this type of communication style is perpetuating division and making it really difficult for humans to understand each other. And I mean really understand each other from an empathetic, objective disposition. Now, I'm sure that we've all done this at some point. I'm not saying that, I'm completely not guilty of this whatsoever. I'm pretty sure I've, jumped to a conclusion about somebody based off of something that they said that I disagreed with. Pretty sure I've done that before. Pretty sure you've done that before. But we gotta stop. We need to progress into a better way of communicating with each other. Okay, it's very important to pay attention to when it's happening in order to keep your critical thinking skills on point. We cannot dumb ourselves down just because of all of these manufactured concepts that aim to divide us. And I mean, you could say that people are just making inferences based off of implications, but to me, this is a form of gaslighting that isn't talked about enough. Like, you just made up a whole scenario about my life in order to try to persuade me to agree with you, or to criticize me for not agreeing with you. And it's not like I'm going to take what you say and run with it. I'm not going to internalize that. But it's still a form of gaslighting. It's still an attempt to change the way I perceive myself. People will also use this this irrational logic to accuse people of saying things that they never said, or making statements that they never made. Twisting the words around first so that they can create the narrative, which will be laying the groundwork for their false if-then statement. So it's like, not only have you made an accusation and jumped to a ridiculous conclusion, but your accusation and your conclusion is based off of a narrative that has been fabricated in your own mind. I always like to refer to that infamous post on Twitter that says, Twitter is the only place where well-articulated sentences will get misinterpreted. You could say, I like pancakes, and somebody will say, so you hate waffles? And it's like, girl, nobody was even talking about waffles. We was talking about pancakes. Let's stay on topic, because that's a whole new sentence. What are you talking about, right? So that kind of thing is happening a lot. That's happening a lot too. And I'm going to need for people to tighten up. Tighten up. I'm noticing that people are doing a lot of psychological projection. And I talk about this in my previous video regarding shadow work, where people don't even know themselves. So they are quick to push, certain narratives onto other people without even taking a look at themselves. Especially with people that they don't know, which is, again, like, it's got to be some sort of mental illness. Like, yeah, psychological projection is related to mental illness. That's why shadow work is so important. There's no introspection. There's no self-reflection. There's no ability to see the polarity in things. We're just taking shit and running with it. Most of these popular movements today in society glorify like victimhood and kind of support people's lack of accountability. So when people see the world through a trauma-based lens, they become confined to their own perspectives, which are subjective and based on emotion. That's very limiting. Like, you only have your own like trauma and like narrow perspectives to go off of when it comes to the world and how you perceive the world. People aren't able to move past their triggers and objectively perceive things or understand things, which makes it difficult and honestly damn near impossible in some cases to gain deeper understanding and radical acceptance of fellow human beings. So people are just not understanding each other, not seeing each other, and refusing to do so. As a whole, we're unable to hold space for nuanced conversations about things like sex and gender, abortion, relationship dynamics, racial matters, health, spiritual religions and beliefs, practices. All of this division and confusion is nothing but devil energy. And we all know that the devil is out to steal, kill, destroy, divide, and conquer. Okay? And it's a sort of, like I said, a sort of manufactured chaos curated by people in positions of power. People in positions of power will absolutely take this form of miscommunication and use it for their own benefit or exploit it. Absolutely, yes. But I'm not going to blame the powers that be on this issue, because this is literally a collective shadow issue. This is a individuals refusing to do shadow work issue. Individuals refusing to see outside of their little bubble issue. Some of these popular movements are simply energy harvesting rituals. Sometimes they're not even sparked by real events or real people or real stories. That's why it's important to look at the word emotion. Okay? This is where the powers that be take like people's vulnerability and emotions and human nature to feel compassion or empathetic for others, but also to victimize themselves, not take accountability for their circumstances. They will use the fuck out of that in order to move the collective towards a certain goal. So this is why, again, let's look at the word emotion. These like powers that be make sure to tug at your heartstrings using emotion to get things in motion or to push a certain narrative along. Say I'm lying. Talk shows, podcasts, blogs, news networks, they are real quick to spin a narrative and fabricate or embellish a story in order to herd the collective to a certain frequency, whether it be low vibrational, as in sad, or low vibrational, as in outraged. All this does is make the people easier to manipulate and control. So that's the whole thing behind this. It's not necessarily they are the cause for people unable to see past their trauma. It's they see that people are unable to see past their trauma and they weaponize the fuck out of that. They take advantage. It's like, people in the world are suffering. People in the world are having a hard time with this. How can we exploit that and use that to our benefit or profit off of it? It is up to you to heal yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody is going to swoop in and save you. You literally have to do that inner work to save yourself. That's fair, right? We can all say that, right? Okay, good. Now, it's up to you as to whether or not you want to tune in to these low frequencies and vibrations, right? So, in my experience, I've been able to just change the channel in which my frequency is vibrating. Society has also formed a very special and significant relationship with the concept of virtue signaling. I love to talk about virtue signaling because I've been seeing it with clear eyes consistently since 2019, Yep, that's about right. I define virtue signaling as the concept of, or the act of disingenuously and flamboyantly standing up for or speaking out against something in public just because it seems like the right thing to do, and making sure that other people see you standing up for this thing so that you can put yourself at a level of moral superiority, and so that you can be perceived as a good person. Does that sound like, are y'all with me? Good and bad are subjective. Let's start there. Good and bad are subjective, and they're subjective to one's personal perceptions of morality. They're subjective to one's personal values or beliefs. There are things that as a society we can agree are good. There's also things that as a society we can agree are bad. However, whether or not you're a good or a bad person is completely rooted in the way you feel about yourself. Not necessarily in the ways that people perceive you. I had to get my whole bottle of wine, y'all. The whole thing, okay? Because who knows how long we're going to be here. Like, this conversation it's just now taking off, honestly. Good and bad are subjective to one's personal perceptions of morality. However, in today's society, popular opinions are deemed good and unpopular opinions are considered bad, which is harmful and problematic in terms of being able to think for yourself and, again, decide what's right and wrong for you. Virtue signaling can look like showing fake solidarity for a cause you wouldn't even care about if, like, most people didn't care about it, if it wasn't trending, right? So it doesn't matter if a person's character or personality consists of. It doesn't matter if they are, you know, an honest, empathetic person. They could be the coldest person on the planet. But as long as they're standing up for the right things politically and socially, they're going to be deemed as a good person. And yeah, as long as they stand up for the right things are extremely loud and flamboyant about these opinions that are widely accepted, widely popular, basically opinions that they were told to have, they're not going to be seen as problematic, and nobody's going to question their character or their morality. We see this a lot on social media with people like changing their profile picture to whatever country is struggling right now outside of the U.S. Even though, you know, people are starving and homeless, and in our country, their support is geared towards another country's turmoil because that's what's trending. We also see it with those corny ass "I voted" stickers. Like, I don't give a fuck if you voted. I don't give a fuck who you voted for. I heard you cheated on your girlfriend. You're a scumbag. I mean, what is that even supposed to mean? I voted. Who gives a fuck? I just find it so hilarious because people really think they did their part. And then they be mad when whoever they voted for doesn't do what they said they were gonna do. Haven't we learned by now? You know what? That's a whole different video. In fact, I'm not going to do a video on that. That's a whole different discussion for a different time, for a different place on somebody else's channel, because we're not going to get into that. I just find it hilarious. It's just so funny. It's virtue signaling. Literally letting people know, hey, guys, look, I voted. I'm a good person. I did my part. Hey, look at me. I voted. It's absolutely obnoxious, in my opinion. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt, because that's what you have the freedom to do. We also saw it with the George Floyd thing in June of 2020. Now, this is really controversial, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say what's fact and what's a lie. But this man allegedly died from a drug overdose, right? But he was commemorated and memorialized as a symbol of police brutality and racism in America. And in response, people people posted black squares all over their Instagram, right? And then, like, after all of the noise and frenzy about that died down, people who care about their brand and their Instagram aesthetic were quick to change that shit back the very next day. It's just virtue signaling. Look at me, guys. Look at my profile. I'm standing up for this popular movement right now. Look at me. I'm a good person. I did my part. So you Angela Davis now because you changed your Instagram pictures? Okay. People who never been to a protest in their entire life, nor plan to, were made to feel like they really did their part. Virtue signaling, my friend. The official definition of virtue signaling is the action or practice of publicly expressing opinions or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. Keyword being publicly expressing opinions. Basically making sure that everybody sees you. The themes in this conversation really relate and tie directly into the themes that are present in George Orwell's 1984, which is basically a book that is set in Oceania, a dystopian society that is like a totalitarian super state in which its citizens are constantly being watched by the government. Big Brother's always watching, and people do not have the freedom to think for themselves. There's a lot of terminologies that are used in George Orwell's 1984 that absolutely apply to our society. So let's go ahead and get into it. People have found a self-proclaimed sense of morality and nobility in the act of condemning or shaming people with different opinions. This serves as a means of silencing them and forcing them into a rationalized conformity, which is a sociological concept introduced by George Orwell known as groupthink. So, groupthink refers to the deterioration in mental efficiency, reality testing, and moral judgments as a result of group pressure, aka the suppression of one's personal opinions and thoughts and feelings in favor of what's deemed socially acceptable. The whole purpose of groupthink is to debilitate society, dampening the art of individualized thinking and the innovation of new ideas or alternative ways of getting things done. So, authenticity is muted by this illusion of invulnerability, where individuals don't feel compelled to have like deep, strong feelings about anything, nor do they feel compelled to speak their truths or tell their stories, because the truth has already been spoken for them and their stories have already been written for them. They don't have to deal with the burden of making their own choices because the right choice has already been made by society. Groupthink, in my opinion, affects one's ability to think critically, maintain mental efficiency, and navigate using their own personal moral compass. So people aren't able to make decisions and go about life in a way that feels good to them. Instead, they're going by what's deemed socially acceptable or appropriate, and that is inauthentic. Groupthink tends to lead people down a path of compromising their own integrity, personal values, and sometimes even their boundaries. This is a desperate attempt to maintain other people's perspectives of them. So yeah, the pressure to conform is intense because nobody wants to be the oddball out or the witch burning at the stake for their opinions. This is, basically cancel culture in a nutshell. People suppress their authenticity, they keep their mouths shut about controversial topics, or they just follow groupthink altogether, and this is all to be perceived as the pinnacle of morality in society. Now, I'm not afraid to be perceived as problematic because, in my opinion, it's problematic to care so much about what people think that you swallow your truth and keep your head down just for somebody else to be okay with you. No, absolutely not. Anyone whose way of thinking surpasses or extends outside of groupthink is condemned and even verbally attacked. People are called these ridiculous names for their personal and sometimes very valid beliefs. If I speak out against the prejudices that, Black people have against other races, or if I don't agree with all these extremist pro-Black ideals, I'm considered a coon, right? If I am desperately searching for an answer to the question, what is a woman? Since society can no longer define what that is, because we can't use the word woman in the definition of what a woman is. That's just not how definitions work. And if I ask that question, I would be labeled a TERF, which is an acronym for a trans exclusionary radical feminist, which I don't know what year we came up with that one. People who speak out against the reconstruction of children's bodies before they hit puberty would be called transphobic. Someone who wants to lose weight, or, people who stay fit to avoid gaining weight are labeled fatphobic. People who don't enthusiastically support sex work or hypersexuality or prostitution are deemed horophobic. People who don't want to cover their face or, basically breathe in their own toxins just because, just to be around a bunch of other people who already have masks on are called anti-maskers. You are a human being with so many dreams, aspirations, fears, talents, gifts, abilities, memories, but society will label you an anti-masker, or better yet, an anti-vaxxer. If you decide not to get this experimental injection, which happens to be killing millions of people, by the way, if you choose not to get this experimental injection, you are deemed an anti-vaxxer. So many labels, so many words. If you are a person who asks questions and is skeptical of the intentions, motives, and agendas set forth by people in positions of power, you are a conspiracy theorist. This type of intolerance for disagreement or controversy has people thinking in the realm of absolutes, where everything is either black or white. There's no space being made for objectivity, nuance, or anything like that. If you have a particular opinion about abortions or vaccines, then you're most likely going to be labeled a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative. I don't even vote. So for you to say that because I have a certain opinion, I must be affiliated with a certain type of political group, that's unfortunate for you, that you only think in the prisms of red and blue, left and right. Very polarized thinking. This polarizing language makes generalized assumptions about people's entire personalities. Like I said, based on political affiliation or which movements they're for or against. Again, these movements are merely social constructs in the first place, and not at all indicative of one's spirit or character. We need to start humanizing people and seeing past these fucking labels. These labels are tearing us apart. People's opinions are shaped by their perspectives, their experiences, and pivotal moments in their lives, okay? You can't just, slap a label on somebody and that be the end-all be-all. That's not fair. You never know. Somebody could be anti-abortion because when they were in the womb, their mother was almost forced to abort. But because their mother refused, they're now here today walking and talking and living their life. I'm going to make a whole other video about abortion, but I just want to say that each side does have good points. But one of the best points that I witnessed someone make was legalized abortion gives room or space for somebody to be forced into an abortion when they don't want one. Because it's legal, because it's available. If you can, threaten someone's livelihood, like, oh, I'll kick you out of the house unless you go get an abortion. Yeah. So I can, like, if it's criminalized, that necessarily wouldn't be an option unless, the abuser went through hella milestones to break the law in order to, get that abortion procedure done. Generally, it's the convenience of abortion clinics being readily available to take you that allow that shit to happen. Yeah, that doesn't mean that they hate women or want to control women's bodies. So if someone, takes a stance against abortion, don't be so quick to label them, oh, you must hate women. Somebody might be anti-sex work because they witnessed their sister get sexually assaulted in a gentleman's club. Or they know somebody who's been human trafficked, which human trafficking hides in plain sight because sex work is so normalized. Porn is so normalized that you really can't tell who in that video is there because they want to be and who's being sexually trafficked, like who's being trafficked. Y'all have no idea. So that doesn't make them whorephobic. It just means that they have a strong opposition to sex work. Somebody might want to lose weight and keep the weight off because the doctor told them that they were pre-diabetic. That doesn't make them fat phobic. That doesn't mean that they've internalized fat phobia. Like, y'all be sounding hella ridiculous when y'all jump to these conclusions about people. Not only have most of these words been socially engineered recently and ingrained into the English vocabulary, but they're used arbitrarily and really don't hold any weight. Like, if everything is blank phobic, then nothing is blank phobic. Y'all call everything phobic. At best, these words can be described as newspeak, another theme from George Orwell's 1984, where newspeak is defined as ambiguous, euphemistic language that is used chiefly to spread a political agenda. The purpose of newspeak is to constrict language, making the collective less expansive and less able to express themselves authentically, which in turn makes them more easily controllable. It's all like a thing. You don't know the origin of people's opinions, but maybe we can understand each other a little bit better if we weren't so quick to slap labels on people, right? So it's getting increasingly difficult to live authentically in today's society because people are walking on eggshells, trying not to offend others and trying not to get canceled. Let's talk about it, y'all. Cancel culture. I'm going to let you know right now. I'm a child of God, and you can't cancel a child of God, okay? Only God can make cancellations around him. And we're back. People feel as though they have the power to dox others, which involves restricting one's ability to navigate the world, earn a living, or pursue a peaceful life just because they have unpopular opinions. Now, I can see if they were acting on those opinions, by discriminating against others or causing harm to others or harassing other people. That's a different story, but simply for having unpopular opinions or unfavorable opinions, I don't think that we have the right to do that. Opinions change as people grow older. Let's say Twitter digs up an old tweet that a celebrity posted from when they were 16 years old. They will say that age 27, this person deserves to be canceled for something that they posted over a decade ago. Like, who are you to say that people can't, one, make mistakes, and two, that people don't grow and evolve into more polished versions of themselves that don't hold those same, harmful opinions as before? Like, who are you to hold somebody's past against them? I think that is a level of entitlement that I just can't even fathom. Cancel culture undermines the values and opinions of certain groups within society while uplifting the values and opinions of other groups. And cancel culture has cultivated this harshly unforgiving mob mentality within society. And again, the mob mentality is rooted in groupthink. So when it comes to unpopular opinions or beliefs, harassment or bullying the person until they apologize or retract their statement is glorified and celebrated, encouraged, if you will. One must assimilate their line of thinking to that of the collectives in order to avoid the consequence of being socially, politically, and sometimes even financially ostracized. We can, see that with Kyrie Irving, and then back, I think a few years ago, there was this whole thing with J.K. Rowling. I still don't really know what the issue with that was, because I don't really know what she said. But it just seemed like people were really upset over something she said and were looking to cancel her. And I'm pretty sure whatever she said was her opinion. Now, some things do warrant cancellation, in my opinion, but it's literally not my place to cancel anyone. Like I said, only God can make cancellations. So we're going to shift into more of a spiritual perspective on all this. So I personally view God as like a shattered mirror. It's an image that has been broken up into millions and billions of fragments. The mirror is God. The broken mirror and its fragments are us, humans. So I personally see myself as a fragment of God, not God in its entirety. Therefore, I don't have the authority or the ability to cancel anybody. Just like that's kind of my whole stance on the death penalty as far as execution goes. I don't think that we have the right to make that call. But that's just me. Everybody has something valuable to contribute to the world. And it isn't until you peel back those layers of what you don't like that you see that beauty and wonder that humanizes even the most evil people. And I'm not advocating for, evil people. I'm just saying we're all reflections of God. And in being that, it doesn't matter what's on the outside. When you peel back those layers, God still resides there. So that's my take on it. And I personally must allow space. This is where my objective thinking really got going within myself, was just realizing that I must allow space for other people or other reflections and pieces of God to express themselves in this world, even if I don't like or agree with those parts. So there are aspects of people that the majority will hate, but there's also beauty and wonder that goes unseen due to our inability, unwillingness, refusal to peel back those layers. Now, as people of a free country, we should be able to dictate and decide, what aspects of our culture are heavily emphasized or sensationalized or normalized or glorified. We should be able to, collectively condemn things. However, expect there to always be a counterculture. Expect there to always be an oddball out. And to try to eliminate that counterculture or eliminate that oddball out is counterproductive in the evolution of our consciousness as a whole, because it's made up of many different parts, even parts that we don't like. And that's the collective shadow right there. That's what shadow is within yourself. The parts that you don't necessarily like. The parts that are hard to love. We still have to make space for them. You can expect there to always be a rebellion. There's always gonna be a counterculture against what's deemed socially acceptable or good. There's never ever gonna be a time where everyone in society agrees on every single thing. It's just not gonna happen. We're just made up of so much. It's just not gonna happen. And that's the beauty of it all, really, you know. Humans are multifaceted beings. And I think it's really important to remember that, especially since our brains naturally want to categorize and define and create monolithic structures for literally every single thing. But how can you define something as complex and infinite as the human being, especially since humans are ever expanding and constricting, and you know, we're just everything, everywhere, all at once. There's so many fragments that come together to make you you, and it's really disheartening when I see people take the most superficial, surface level parts of a person and use it to define their whole personhood. It's just like, let's dig a little bit deeper to see what's underneath the surface. We need to be really careful about putting each other in boxes based on social constructs, especially. The overemphasis of labels creates limitation and confinement of consciousness. This results in narrow perspectives shaped by small-minded and subjective thinking. Again, it puts a limitation on our ability to expand and evolve in consciousness. So the stakes become even higher when groupthink comes into play, because whose singular mind are we being subjected to? What is controlling this hive mind? If one wishes to truly expand their consciousness, I suggest that they be open to holding space for others and having nuanced conversations about difficult or controversial topics. I think it's really important to have open hearts, open minds, and discernment, of course, and respect for one another, even when we don't see eye to eye. So that's just what I wanted to say. If you watched this entire video, you are absolutely tribe. Welcome to the family. Go ahead and subscribe, like this video, and I'll see you guys next time.